Welcome to Learning to Love Our Land podcast, the podcast that invites you to embark on a remarkable journey of transformation. Our planet is facing a biodiversity crisis, and the very ecosystems that sustain us are struggling to survive. But fear not, because there is hope on the horizon. I'm Mike Meldon, and I'm joined by Doug Gilbert. Together, we run a nonprofit called Love Our Land, whose mission is to bring back life to our neighborhoods, 1 yard at a time. We plan to explain the dangers of non-native invasive species and help people understand the fundamental role native plants have in maintaining healthy ecosystems. Together, we'll explore how you can make a huge impact on the world around us in the comfort of your own backyard.
The statistics are staggering. Between 1970 and 2018, we lost a heartbreaking 69% of our global wildlife. In North America, our feathered friends have declined by roughly 30%. That's 3 billion fewer birds in North America's forests, prairies, and other habitats than there were in 1970. So what's the root cause? While there are many factors responsible for the decline of biodiversity, the chief culprit is habitat loss and degradation.
Every 30 seconds, the United States loses a football field of natural lands to development. It's a crisis that has and continues to spiral out of control. But it's not too late to reverse the downward trajectory.
Join us as we dive into the science, stories, and solutions to the biodiversity crisis. We'll introduce you to inspiring experts and passionate conservationists who are leading the charge.
But here's the twist. You're not just a listener. You're a vital player in this life-saving mission. Ecologist Douglas Tallamy puts it best. We must construct ecosystems that contain all their functional parts right where humans abound.
That's right. You can transform your yard and neighborhood into a haven for biodiversity. Each episode will bring you key insights and actionable steps to take right in your own neck of the woods. We'll cover the natural phenomena and community activities happening at the time each episode is released. We'll also touch on creating, managing, and maintaining habitat to give you the knowledge and skills necessary to be responsible stewards of the land. Plus, we'll feature guests who will share their expertise and reveal how you can make your work as a community land steward even more impactful.
Now, in this, our first episode, we're going to take a minute to introduce ourselves, and we're going to learn what is going on around the world this month. And we're going to discuss what we can be doing in our yards right now to be a good steward. We will also include a spooky interview with Doug about bats and why this is an important time of year for them.
So grab your favorite pumpkin spice beverage, listen up, and get ready to make a positive impact on the world around you. Learning to love our land starts now.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. You learned a little bit about what this podcast is going to be about, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am, and then Doug's going to tell you a little bit about who he is. Long story short, I'm a high school teacher. I'm a social studies teacher. I'm not a guy that is an expert in any way of ecology or the natural world around us. I think was lucky to get a D in biology in high school, and I don't know if I took really any type of zoology course ever in my life, but I've always cared for it. I've always had this place in my heart for the outdoors. I grew up like many 80s kids out in the creek, in the woods all day, and that has always had a special place for me, and it's a place where I like to go and be. And so not too long ago, I became a member of Loveland's Tree and Environment Committee just because I wanted to play a role in local politics, not especially because that was the niche I knew a lot about or wanted to be in. I cared about it. That was about the extent of it. And then I became the chairman of that committee and met Doug. Doug had recently moved to town and was looking for a way to get involved, and he is an expert in all this, as he'll explain. And I remember the biggest thing that changed me and when Doug became involved was we took a walk through what I thought was my local oasis. This area behind my house, this creek this green space that I would go for peace or down with the kids to play in the creek or have the dogs run around. And Doug pretty much told me this is very unhealthy area, that what I'm looking at is not supposed to be here. It does not support life. And my jaw hit the ground. I was taken aback that this green all around me that I was forest bathing in, that was just my paradise, was sick and unhealthy. And he was right. You know, what was the life I was seeing? I wasn't seeing much of it at all. And that really affected me. And as Doug and I would work through our committee, those were the things we started to focus on. Doug has already been focused on these things, but he got me to look at green spaces in a new way. And we decided, all right, we're doing a lot of work for the city. Let's do a lot of work in people's yards and let people now see what I see. Because a lot of people aren't like Doug, that know, able to point out different bee species or flower species or this and that. They're looking at green spaces the way I was looking at green spaces, is, hey, it's green, it's good to go. And I needed people to see that there is a biodiversity crisis going on. And Doug and I created Love Our Land to help people see the crisis and to give them ways that they can help be good land stewards and fix the crisis. And here's Doug.
Thanks, Mike. A lot of what you just said is really well put. So I'm just gonna, touch on kind of my journey. I grew up in what I like to call the corn desert, rural Western Ohio, and there were still places to explore and connect with nature, little woodlots here and there, streams here and there, and it was in those spaces that I found solace. And especially as a kid, as a teenager, struggling with just trying to fit in, all of that stuff, finding, connecting with nature, something that's just not judging you and just giving you space for yourself, is really powerful. And so in high school, I went to a junior vocational school, Miami Valley Career Technology Center. They had an environmental program that really got me engaged more with the outdoors. It kind of opened my eyes to the fact that I could build a career out of loving nature. And so after I graduated there, I went on to go to school at Hocking College in southeastern Ohio, and then West Virginia University. And over the course of my time in school, I got to travel across the United States, working on a variety of different wildlife conservation projects. Worked with spotted owls in the western U.S., burrowing owls, bats, which we're going to talk a little bit about here later on, variety of songbirds, and so much more. And throughout all of that, it became really difficult for me because there is no place you go in this country or anywhere in the world where you can not see the impacts that we as humans have had on the environment and on the ecosystems that sustain us. There were all the species that I've worked with are species that are, not doing very well. They're in decline, they're imperiled. And that's why they're getting attention from, government agencies or NGOs or other groups. And so I would oftentimes find myself feeling like things were hopeless. There was nothing that could be done. And the amazing thing about community conservation and backyard conservation is it strips away the hopelessness from the situation. You all of a sudden become, this active player in transforming the world around you and helping biodiversity and wildlife. And that in and of itself, I think, is something that we all can get a lot out of. And not only are we gaining something from it, but we're helping these ecosystems become healthy. We're regenerating biodiversity. And so I've been working on this type of stuff for a number of years now. When I moved to Loveland, I was trying to find a group or individuals that I could engage with to do this type of work. And I actually saw a video of Mike speaking to city council about sustainability issues, and I thought, this is my guy. So I met Mike, became an active member in the Tree and Environment Committee with the city, which I still am involved with that committee, and we got to work. And through our efforts, we're slowly but surely we're changing the landscape here in Loveland.
So, in each episode, we have 3 main things that we'd like to touch on. Number 1, the phenology, aka the various natural phenomena occurring at this time of year. 2, local events that are sure to help you and your loved ones connect with nature. And 3, we want to make sure that we discuss the types of conservation activities that are appropriate to implement during this particular season. So, Doug, we're coming up on the end of October. The leaves are changing, the temperature's dropping, the spooky decorations are popping up everywhere. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with nature around Loveland right now?
So, Mike, it's a great thing you mentioned with the leaves changing colors and they're beginning to fall. It's really tempting for a lot of us to reach for that leaf blower or the rake and really just sweep all those leaves right to the curb for the city to conveniently haul away, which can be great. But those fallen leaves are really important habitat for a variety of organisms. There's this process I kind of go through in my own yard that helps me determine what it is I should do with the leaves. First, I look around and determine which leaves can stay put. So basically, if the leaves are going to stay, if they were to stay there, are they going to cause any problems? Are they going to gunk up any gutters, or are they going to
grass that you want to have?
Yeah, exactly. If they're going to kill your grass, then that's something you want to you manage and deal with. But in areas where those things aren't going to happen, just leave those leaves there. It's great. It's less work for you, but you're not necessarily being lazy. I think a lot of times people think, oh, if you leave the leaves there, my neighbors are going to think I'm lazy. What I do is I put a little sign up each season that says leaves are not litter. And that way people walking by my yard know, like, oh, it's not that he's just, lazy and doesn't want to, do that work. There's an intentionality to it.
Let me say this. I think a lot of people are reading this online. Leave the leaves, leave the leaves. And I think some people have this instinct going full bore one way or the other. Like, heck no. Number one, I'm not allowed to do this. My HOA is not, and I don't want to. I love my pristine yard. I'm not going to do it. And that's okay. Okay. That's a pushback, and we get it. These people aren't there yet. You may not understand it. Then there are people that are saying, okay, I'm going to leave it, but they're not understanding that you could ruin your yard. This is not good for your lawn, right, people?
That's correct.
So you need a middle ground.
Yeah.
So and that can be systematic, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you realize, okay, I've got lawn, I can't let the leaves just sit there. That's fine. Rake those leaves up and pile them up in existing flower beds or around trees. Create a new, bed for plants and leaves around the base of your trees. The process of mulching is something that not a lot of people, really understand. So the purpose of mulching is to actually create sort of a buffer for the root systems of the plants that are being mulched. You want to keep things moisture retained in the summer when things are getting really dry. You want to keep those root systems cool, otherwise they shrivel up, they die. So these leaves are fantastic mulch for that purpose. So You take those leaves that are on your lawn, you put them there, everybody's happy. Because like I mentioned, these leaves are important habitat for tons of different organisms. Salamanders, for example, they need that heavy leaf litter. And, there are lots of things that come in and sort of colonize those spaces that have leaves. But there's also critters that are living inside the leaves that, as they fall from the top of the canopy, they've got something living in them. And so if we just throw those away, burn them, or get rid of them.
Or cut them up, right?
Or cut them up.
We don't want to shred them.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. You don't really want to shred these things up. A lot of lawnmowers give you the ability to do that. It bags it up for you. So it's a really attractive thing for a lot of folks who are maintaining lawns, but not so good for biodiversity.
I know when I had a bigger lawn, we just picked an area in the back, and we literally would rake them all up into that area, and the stack would be, by the time fall was over, the stack was taller than me. Which isn't that saying much, but it probably was over 6 feet tall. Mm-hmm. And the good news is by spring it was a foot tall.
That's right. Yeah.
So people can if you can find a spot too.
Absolutely.
If you don't have a landscaping to use it for mulch, or you don't want it, some people just may not want to use it for mulch.
Or you might have too much, that you can't pile that much onto your, in those beds. So yeah, that takes you to the next step in the process. Find a spot where these leaves would be, have a suitable place. And exactly what you said, I do the same thing. And yeah, I'll oftentimes have my girls go out, jump on them, and, make them squish them down as much as they can. And they do their best work with it. They're rolling around, and, at the end of it, we still have a 4 foot tall, pile of leaves. But like you said, once winter comes and everything, those things just, press right down into the earth. And so that 4 foot tall pile becomes, 6 inches tall, like pretty quickly. So, and that's actually, if you want to have a healthy forest, that's exactly what you're striving for. You want to have a thick, rich layer of duff, building up in your forest, because that's exactly where all the critters are going to be going, including pollinators like queen bumblebees, which are, many species are declining rapidly. And one reason for the loss is, they don't have the habitat. They don't have that overwintering habitat. And so just creating this leaf pile, you could be saving an imperiled pollinator just by doing that. Don't even have to have flowers. Those leaves alone can be doing a lot of work for you.
That's awesome. Anything else about, I want to mention this. I mentioned, are leaf blowers okay? Do those change anything? I heard something about leaf blowers, or are they just neutral?
Yeah, no, leaf blowers, really, there's nothing in particular wrong with leaf blowers. Okay. I mean, they can be noisy, that's for sure. So if we get into the topic of noise pollution, there's that. But especially if you have an electric leaf blower, no, they cut the work, down considerably for the homeowner, and can be really effective in doing this in a much quicker manner. So there's nothing inherently wrong with using a leaf blower.
Awesome. So we got the leaves. What else we got going on this time of year that people can help be good stewards?
So one other thing I want to mention about the leaves that is not readily apparent is that if you have non-native invasive tree species like tree of heaven or the Callery/Bradford pear, these things are dropping, seeds like crazy this time of year. And if you happen to have that going on, you may not necessarily want to take those leaves that have all these seeds accumulated in them and put them in new places. Though that's a time when it might be best to actually put those leaves and seeds in trash bags, or even burn them.
And what particular ones would you point out? You pointed out the Callery pear, Bradford pear, tree of heaven. What else would be on that list?
So those are really the big ones that I can think of in residential neighborhoods that are still commonly planted as ornamental trees. The other one that I'll mention is Norway maple, which is an extremely popular ornamental tree and has become pretty invasive in the northeastern United States. I haven't seen it as bad in this part of the country, but that doesn't mean it won't become a bigger issue in the future. So if you know of any non-native invasive species that you've got on your property or around your property, just be aware of that.
Gotcha. What about something like honeysuckle? That doesn't count, right? Would that change anything? I mean,
if you've got honeysuckle, then yeah, you definitely want to be aware of that too. One thing that I have done is when I'm raking, if I've removed most of the bush honeysuckle from my property, but if I still have some, and you can see those bright red berries. I'm partially colorblind, and I can still see those bright red berries. So, yeah, pretty conspicuous. What I'll do is I will cut the branch, almost prune the branch off, and take and throw all those seeds into a trash bag. And that way, when I'm raking up any leaves underneath, there's not much of an issue.
Yeah, because it's not always that, hey, they're going to grow back in your yard. What the birds might take them. There's a reason that when you drive down or along 275 in the spring that you see so many blooming Callery pears, and they're coming from our yards, our leaves in our yards that we might be leaving or putting on the side, and they're getting to these areas. Yep. Crazy. All right, what we got next, Doug?
All right, so I want to just mention we're getting to the time of year when most of our wildflowers are done for the season, but we still have a couple of groups that are barely hanging on, and they're two of the most diverse and conspicuous groups of wildflowers in this region. They're the goldenrods and the asters. So collectively, there's more than 50 species between those two groups here in Ohio. People will recognize goldenrods from, in the fall, you'll see, like early fall, you're going to see yellow fields just packed full of yellow flowers. Those are goldenrods. A lot of times they're one of two, species. Canada goldenrod and tall goldenrod are both very common in fields, but we see them growing in all sorts of open areas, fence rows, ditches, as we drive along roads, and these are all very important. The problem that we have is these goldenrods are often blamed for seasonal allergies and hay fever. However, the true culprit behind hay fever are ragweeds.
So people are getting rid of goldenrods because they are blaming them for these allergies, but they're not the culprit.
Yeah. So these allergies that we experience, myself included, in the fall, they're caused by, grains of pollen that are small and extremely light, and they're capable of drifting really far distances from where they, originated from to your nasal cavities. Goldenrods, however, have large and sticky pollen grains that are adapted to be collected and carried by insects, primarily bees, from flower to flower to facilitate pollination.
So they couldn't have done it.
That's right.
And they're getting all the blame.
And there's
still probably have people saying, nope.
Yes.
It's goldenrods.
Yeah. I've explained it to people many times, and they're like, nope, my allergist says this.
My grandmother told me.
Yeah. Well, and, it's one thing to have your grandmother tell you, but when a medical doctor tells you that it's goldenrod, it becomes even more problematic because there's been research done to look at, doctors and whether or not they recognize that goldenrods aren't actually the culprit, and these things get lumped into this category, this goldenrod category, but it's actually the ragweed's doing.
And this goes into the bigger story. This is why people may say, well, what the heck are you telling us this for?
Right.
And it's because we need goldenrods. There's a lot of native flowers, plants that we don't see anymore. And we're seeing these still. Doug brought it up. It's that syndrome. It's that thing where you hear about it, for the first time ever, and then you see it that night on a TV or in a commercial or somebody mentions. You're like, oh my gosh, I'd never heard of it before, and I see it. Well, Doug did that to me last week with goldenrods. I saw him on the side of the street here on West Loveland. But the big point is this: people are blaming them. They're getting rid of them.
That's right.
Them.
Yep.
And so eventually we'll see less and less. And we want to get the word out that it's not their fault. Leave them.
Right.
We need you to actually plant them.
Plant them and leave them. Yeah, that's right.
What Doug's going to talk about here in a minute is because right now this is their season, right? This is right now the food for pollinators.
Yeah.
Is goldenrods, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goldenrods and asters are huge for this time of year. Goldenrods in particular, the leaves and the foliage support over 70 species of caterpillars.
That's crazy.
There are over 50 species of bees that target pollen from goldenrods, meaning if these caterpillars and bees didn't have the goldenrod, they wouldn't be here. So, without goldenrods, they just cannot survive. These are considered keystone plants, meaning you remove them from the ecosystem and all of a sudden things start to unravel.
So not only do we not want you to get rid of them, we want you to plant them.
That's right. And there are many types. Like I said, for goldenrods in particular, there are about 24 species or so that are native to Ohio. So you've got a lot to choose from, and they don't all look the same. So some like forests, some like openings, so get online, take a look from reputable sources, and see what you come up with.
And this may not be the type and I'll ask you, is this the type of time of year to plant? And if so, how do we go about it? What should we be planting? Can we plant everything at once? I don't know.
So, yeah, actually, this time of year is really great. The plants, perennials in particular. Annuals, of course, there's no need to plant those yet. You can throw seed down that's been produced this year, but any annuals you have are going to die anyways. So perennials, though, they are entering a dormancy period, just like trees do, and so getting those established now is great. They have all winter to kind of settle into their new home, and by spring, when things start to warm up, they're just kicking off and they're going. Things to consider when going about planting these perennials, whether, it's herbaceous plants like the, goldenrods or asters, or it's shrubs or trees. You want to dig a big enough hole that your plant is not going to become root bound. And what I mean by root bound is the actual roots will start. You see it if you've had a plant that's been in a pot for too long. The roots start going around the outside of the pot, and they basically end up cutting off their ability to absorb water and nutrients. And so you want to create a hole that is basically about double the width and depth of that root system that you have on your plant. And when you fill that back in, there will be a lot of nice porous soil for those roots to really spread out in. So that's really what you're interested there.
And so for instance, where goldenrods are prevalent right now, is that all they want to plant right now? Or should they, how many species should we plant? How should we be looking ahead?
So you can plant anything, any perennial that you're thinking about is going to be good to plant right now, because like I said, it's entering this dormancy period, and they will just get in the ground. They'll kind of settle themselves in, and winter comes, and they just chill there for a while. Once spring comes and things start to warm up, boom, they take off. So yeah, you can do goldenrods, asters. If you're looking to do some forest species, things like Virginia bluebells, large flower trillium, our state wildflower. there's a lot of variety out there, and we actually have.
Is there a magic number of what I should plant?
So what I recommend is that for each species that you want to plant, make sure you have at least 3 individuals of that species. And that's so that pollination can occur and you're getting, some genetic flow between those individuals.
Is it also, and this is just guessing, if a deer were to eat one or not?
Yeah, so that's a great thing to mention. What planting a lot of something does is you're basically hedging your bets. Like,
so maybe more than 3, but the minimum of 3.
The minimum of 3.
Gotcha.
Yes, absolutely. Ideally, what I strive to do is I like to get 9 individuals of something.
There you go.
But space is limited, and so it becomes a mathematical game, right? So if you're trying to plant what I call a biodiversity island that has flowering resources for pollinators from spring to fall, you're going to want about 5 species, at least 5 species of plants. And if you're using the minimum of 3 plants per species, you're at 15 species.
Or if you did your 9.
Or if I
did. Do your math, that'd be what, 45?
45.
Dang.
So, yeah, if you think about the 5 species, 15 plants, that's going to take up, each plant takes about 2 to 3 feet of space, radius.
Right.
And so you're looking at about 100 square feet or so for that. So if you were to go to the 9,
you better have some space.
Yeah, you're getting closer to the 900, 1,000, square feet range.
Which some of you have.
Absolutely. And we're looking at you. You need to be doing it.
That's right. So you mentioned that we have minimum of 3, and that's just because it's more bountiful for the pollinators, right? And then we could lose some. So more would be that. But why do you want 5 different species?
Yeah, so, from spring to fall, we're really wanting to provide food for pollinators. Some species only occur in the springtime, some only occur in the fall, some only occur in between, and some occur from spring to fall.
So you would want to map that out. You don't want just 5 random species.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. So there are roughly 5 bloom periods that you want to kind of strive to hit. So, you've got your spring, your late spring, early summer, late summer, fall, and then fall.
Now these these things that the tags that I see at Lowe's make so much more sense to me now.
Exactly.
I'll be honest. I always wondered why they were so specific. Like, why do I need to know, early, late spring? And now, and obviously I wasn't into this, and it makes so much more sense.
Yep.
And this is, and people, you want to fill every one of those, because if you leave one out, right?
Yeah.
Then you're not supporting life.
Yes.
They're going to go somewhere else or
blank out.
Blank out. Right.
Yeah.
So it's important that you hit all 5 growing periods.
Exactly. But
blooming periods,
one thing to keep in mind is, say, homeowner A only has so much space to work with. They can really only accommodate, 10 plants.
Gotcha.
If homeowner B, ends up accommodating those 5 additional plants, well, all of a sudden they have a cohesive little biodiversity island there.
Work with your neighbors.
So work with your neighbors. That's, community conservation is all about coming together to meet a common goal. And in this case, it's promoting biodiversity. And so, be neighborly.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the things we talk about with in Love Our Land, in one of the guys we follow is Douglas Talamine. You're going to hear his name probably a lot during different episodes of our podcast. He talks about creating a homegrown national park. And what that means is that, we have national parks, and we're saving, ecological land for the environment, right? To live as it should, to support life. And if we all own our own private lands, we can do the same thing.
Yeah.
We can make them support life. And you don't have to do it all yourself on your own land. That's why
Right.
it's homegrown national park. And they even have a map that you can go to and add if you have enough native species and whatsoever on your land, you can become part of this. And we're trying to create the same thing in Loveland.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Doug. So now let's get into our final section of this episode. And seeing that we are in the midst of the Halloween season, we want to discuss a group of animals that are often considered scary or spooky.
That's right, Mike. I think there are lots of wildlife that get a bad rap, and this group is high on that list. Today we're discussing bats.
Doug, before we move forward, though, I have got to ask, do bats want to fly in people's hair? I hear the people say that when we encountered a bat in a house or building, that the bat tries to get in your hair. And that is the reason that they want to make a nest. Is that real? Is that true?
So, I too have heard this, and I know exactly what it is these folks are thinking about. Some of my first experiences with bats occurred when I was a youngster, investigating old buildings with my friends. So when bats are spooked, they flush. They take flight very quickly.
Right to your head.
Right to your head. And, they don't exactly have their bearings quite yet. And especially when they're in such a small enclosed space. They're used to, coming out of a tree or something like that. They've got a lot of space to kind of fly around, orient themselves, and take off. That's not the case inside a building. So, it does sometimes happen that, bats will fly near an individual's head, but I can assure you they would much rather be like nowhere near a person.
Yeah, and as you think about it, I'm thinking of these scenes. I'm like, it's in your house. It's like you just think of ducking automatically. Like, they're not really going for your head or a cave, right?
Yeah.
It's just our natural instinct to duck, and it's like, they're not really going for your hair, but maybe just your mind is like, oh.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that there are cases where a bat being disoriented, they will accidentally fly into a woman's large.
If you have long hair.
If you have long. Yep.
That makes sense. Well, that makes it, less spooky. You're killing the spookiness of it, Doug. So what can you tell us more about bats, especially species that are found here in Ohio?
Yeah, so Ohio's got, over a dozen species of bats here. We've documented 13 species. They range from the teensy tiny eastern small-footed bat to the more robust hoary bat and the big brown bat, they're both about the same size. Each species of bat that we have here requires a particular type of habitat with specific characteristics. Some like really old, mature forest with lots of big dead trees. Other bats like a more savanna-style, landscape where you've got some big trees out there, but it's very open for them to forage in. So, what may be suitable for one species isn't exactly suitable for another.
So, where they live, it also, too, it's dependent on the time of year, right?
Yeah. So, we have bats that, in the summertime, they're out and about. They're, in the forest, they're in prairies, they're going around eating up insects and everything. But this time of year is very, very interesting because we have two groups of bats. We have our hibernating bats. And these are the bats people traditionally think of, living in caves for the winter. And then we have migratory bats. So like birds, songbirds that migrate south for the winter, these bats actually migrate to warmer areas so that they can continue to feed. And so right now, our hibernating bats are actually doing what's called a staging, or they're going to where they're going to hibernate. So that's either around here, it's likely a limestone mine that's been excavated for limestone production, now has large subterranean habitat available to the bats, or it's a cave. And so natural caves, which we have some natural limestone caves in Kentucky. We have other caves, in Appalachia, a lot of coal mines in Appalachia that harbor a lot of our hibernating bats.
Wow, and that's it. So they're not going to hibernate in a snag. In a
Yeah,
tree.
in a dead tree, no.
So that's why when the state or regulatory organizations say you're not supposed to cut down trees in the summer,
Yeah.
is because bats may be in there, or
That's
endangered bats might be in there.
That's right. Yeah. So if you've ever had to go to the state and say, hey, we're building a housing development or something here, there's forest here, you'll get a letter back that says you cannot cut down trees larger than 6 inches in diameter between May 15th and August 15th, something like that.
October, isn't it? Or is it
Yeah, some of them, if you're close enough to a place where they hibernate,
Down
then
here, I think
yes,
it's October.
Yeah, then it is October, and that's those are rough guidelines. Bats don't listen to political rules.
Sure.
They don't listen to these rules. So sometimes they're out of the area by then. Sometimes they're not. And so
And people should, even if there's not a regulatory thing for your own private property, is there? Does that play a role on private property or not?
So so if you were to do it and somebody was there documenting the whole thing and they saw that you had a dead Indiana bat and it died because of you cutting down a tree, then
So it is private property does fall under that. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So for you out there, just know that. Yeah, going forward.
Yeah.
They're trying to protect bats.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody's necessarily going to come out and watch everybody who cuts a tree down within that time frame. But if you want to
most people listening here are trying to do the right thing.
If you want to adopt a best management practice,
right,
wait to cut. The other thing you can do, and actually one of the things I get paid to do, is go watch trees that are planning to be cut. And you basically go out at night right before sunset and you just put a chair down, sit down, and you watch to see if any bats fly out of that tree. If no bats fly out of the tree, it's a pretty safe assumption that if the next morning you could cut down that tree and it's not going to be a problem for bats.
And I'm going to play my role here.
Yeah, play it. Play it.
How do I know the difference just from watching a bat fly from a bird? Is there something you can tell or no?
Oh, yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's very distinct. Sometimes when the bats come out, there's still enough light that you're able to actually see the wing membrane.
Gotcha.
You can kind of see the translucency of that, where the light's sort of coming through. So it's pretty evident. And birds typically do not fly out during that time. They're flying in to a tree. And most of these trees, if they are live and they have no bark that's peeling away from them, they're not going to harbor bats. Bats really need dead bark that they can kind of get up underneath and shelter themselves, kind of like the shingles on a roof. They get up underneath that, whereas birds don't use that type of habitat. Some do, but most do not. So this time of year, the spookiness, the reason we see bats in Halloween decorations and such, is that because they're all getting ready to hibernate and we're seeing is it more movement or is it because they're migrating? What do you think? Or is it all of it? So I think it's probably a mix of factors here, but definitely one thing that happens this time of year is this fall staging that occurs. These bats from all over will come to where it is they're going to hibernate for the season. And if you're super lucky, it might be your attic or something like that. So you could end up
Depends on who
seeing.
you're talking to.
Yeah, right. So you could end up seeing a lot of bats, or if you live near a cave or a mine or something like that, bats are coming in large large groups at that time, and they're, aggregating. So I think there is definitely a better chance to see bats if you live close to these types of areas. Like, it's a good time to see bats. I think the other thing about Halloween is, spooky stuff, like bats live in caves, like deep, dark spaces that are kind of scary already, so they're associated with that as well.
And I guess, and the vampire bat, obviously, because they...
How could we forget?
Suck in blood.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Because they might suck your blood.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
So let's get away from the spookiness. Bats, like everything that we're going to talk about in this episode, all life is meaning. All life is part of the food web, part of the mother nature, part of every little piece matters.
Yep.
Why are bats so important?
Yeah, so bats are really incredible in that they're great for pest control. And not just from a human health standpoint, but from an agricultural standpoint too. So, a single nursing mother can consume over 4,000 insects in a single night.
Wow.
Over the course of a summer, that adds up to a lot of insects. So, one wild thing to think about is that, even if you were to lose a small number of bats, all of a sudden, those 4,000, or more individuals every day that are being taken out of the ecosystem, those insects really start to pile up, and they can have huge consequences for, like I said, human health and agriculture. Corn borer is a type of beetle that decimates corn. It's been a huge problem in the past, and bats can really, put a hurting on them when you look at the bat poop. And yes, there are scientists that look at bat poop. Guano, yes. There we go. Man, Mike, that's so technical.
I was pretty proud of myself. Thank you.
So when you look at that and you start to look at what it is they're consuming, in areas where the corn, borer moths, are, they can make up a considerable amount of the diet of those bats. So they're helping out a lot. So yeah, even losing a small number of those bats can have huge implications. And the fact that in some areas we've lost 95% of our bats due to certain conservation issues, that's particularly alarming.
Yeah. We don't want to lose bats. We don't want to lose any more bats. What are the threats to bats?
Yeah, so I want to mention these guys first because I didn't talk much about them. The migratory bats.
Yeah.
So the eastern red bat, silver-haired bat, hoary bat. These are bats that at this time of year are flying in great numbers and great abundance. And one big issue, and this is something that, a lot of environmentalists have a hard time understanding, is that wind turbines are a huge, huge killer of these migratory bats.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, everything,
There's nothing we do that's,
Right. It's a shame. Trying to do good for energy, and they're killing off our bats.
Yeah, so I spent multiple seasons looking for carcasses of bats underneath wind turbines during the fall, and there are times where you're losing hundreds of bats, over the course of a wind energy facility. So it's pretty rough, but there's work being done to, I think, address those issues to try to deter bats from coming within close enough proximity that there's an issue. So that's promising. The other huge one that has decimated our bats that hibernate is white nose syndrome. And so this is an illness caused by a fungus that was introduced from Europe. Likely
Asia, you get away with this one.
Yeah, right. So, and it was, likely brought over by cavers or infected mining equipment. I don't know if there's been a definitive answer as to who brought it over and how, but those are sort of the culprits. And that has truly decimated populations. I'll give you an example. So I work for a consulting firm that the firm does hibernacula surveys for Indiana bats and other hibernating bats in a mine in Preble County, Ohio. This mine is, or at least was, the largest hibernaculum for Indiana bats in Ohio. So there are a lot of bats there. Prior to 2016, there were groups of 30 individuals or more that would come in. It would take them, a day and a half, so 8 hours and then 12 hours for 30 individuals to go through this mine in the areas where they were allowed to access and count how many bats there were.
30 individuals, how many hours?
12.
Wow.
We had 8 individuals, I believe, in 2016, and we were out in 4 hours.
Ooh.
So just, looking at it that way, it tells you that those numbers have dropped considerably. And I can't remember what the numbers were, but I want to say it was upwards of 85% decline in.
That's sickening.
Yeah.
And is that the most endangered bat around here, is the Indiana bat?
So probably right now, the Indiana bat is still probably has the lowest numbers, but there are others that are quickly following suit. The tricolored bat, the little brown bat, which at one point in time was the most common bat in eastern North America. If people went out to catch those bats, they would have no problem catching multiple individuals every night in large mist nets. I worked for several seasons doing mist net surveys. Have not seen a little brown bat.
For same reasons?
Same reasons, yeah. So white nose syndrome is something that once a cave has that fungus inside it, it basically can be transmitted. And so bats that hibernated somewhere else, who made it through the winter, came to somewhere else or interacted with another bat outside of the cave, those spores are really good at just, hanging on to the fur. They get on the cave walls, and at that point, you basically need to sterilize the entire cave. Yeah, wow. And I can't really do that. So, those are kind of the big ones. There are lots of other ones, including habitat loss and degradation. But yeah, those are the big ones.
All right, sounds like a pretty bad situation. What can we do? What can people do? Can people do anything in their own yards? People are listening to this podcast because that's the idea. So
we think about these animals and the fact that they eat aerial insects. So these insects that are flying around, it's not just, they'll eat mosquitoes and moths and other things, but there are lots of other insects that they can consume. And by supporting robust native vegetation on your property, you're going to be inherently bolstering those insect populations, which can then add to, potential prey sources for the bats. So giving, these bats enough food is really important, especially, when mothers are nursing young. You got to make sure that she's got enough food to be able to nurse those young. And then right before they go into hibernate, if they have a lot of food and they've got a lot of body fat reserves in their systems, they're much more likely, to be able to survive white nose syndrome if they contract it than a bat that did not have those energy reserves in their system. So having lots of, insects available to them, not just the tiny mosquitoes, but like larger chunky insects that native plants can support, that's the way to go.
I think we're going to find that's the answer to a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
That's our answer.
Yep. Native plants are fundamental. They are the foundation of our food webs. So, yeah.
All right, so let's go into now a little bit about what's going on right now in conservation and the events that you guys can take part of, and you might even see us there. The first one will definitely be there. Non-Native Invasive Species Removal Day at Grailville. Join Love Our Land and the Grail Saturday, November 4th from 9 a.m. to noon as we continue our efforts to remove invasive calorie pears and other non-native invasive vegetation from the fields at Grailville. If you want to be a part of that, we'd love to have you. You can RSVP on our website, www.loveourland.org. Our next event we'd like to feature is the Greater Cincinnati Wild Ones Chapter Meeting with a presentation by naturalist Tom Borgman called How to Design, Plant, and Maintain Your Native Landscape at the Cincinnati Civic Garden Center, 2715 Reading Road, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45206 on Wednesday, November 8th, 2023 from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. This event is free and open to the public. All are welcome. Please RSVP, though, at cincinnatiwildones@gmail.com. And finally, Books and Boots Reading Club, hosted by Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District at Season Good Nature Center, 203 Woodland Mound Drive, Anderson Township, on Saturday, November 11th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Join the Soil and Water Conservation District staff for a themed discussion and walk in one of the great parks of Hamilton County. Discussion topics are targeted to teens and adults. Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library staff will offer children's activities during the discussions. Then all will head outside for a walk in nature. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Learning to Love Our Land podcast. On behalf of Doug and myself, we appreciate you taking the time to listen. And we appreciate you making the moves to make our environment a little bit better. Our goal of bringing life back to our neighborhoods 1 yard at a time can only be done with your help. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much.